While it seemed like Jim Harbaugh was going to end up being the main character of Big Ten Media Days, Ryan Day has decided that he wants to go ahead and contend for that title. Just wait and listen to hear what he had to say about the game. Coming up on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Wednesday. We are not live at Lucas Oil Stadium as intended for Big Ten Media Days. We were earlier, just not for the podcast or for any video recording of any sort, because someone got sleepy. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group, and I was there for day one of Big Ten Media Days, wholly unproductive for the most part, as it tends to go, weirdly. You think you get all this material, you just sit down, crank it out, there you go. It doesn't work out that way. And honestly, I'd kind of given up coming up with any kind of real content whatsoever. That is until I, with my tired feet from walking around all day, decided that I was going to go ahead and hang out at the Ryan Day podium sessions. Now, I had no questions really for him this time around because anything I asked was going to be kind of trite in a way. It was going to be, hey, you lost to Michigan 2 times. What would it be like to lose a third one? I didn't really have anything. Well, he took care of it for me and went ahead and said some questionable things about the game, as in he would be fine if that. He didn't say it would be fine. He said it is a conversation worth having, that the game doesn't end on that doesn't end the regular season. Wow, see, that's how tired I am right now. Anyhow, that's what he said. Let's go ahead and watch it, listen to it, whichever way you go with it.
Yeah, I think because the Big Ten has such a long tradition and there's so many historic games and rivalries for some teams, and then others maybe not as much. It was a challenge, I think, to put this together and not have the East and the West anymore. You're tying in UCLA, you're tying in USC. There's a lot of things at play here. So I think they did the best they could, try to put that all together. I know that one of the goals was to try to get as many teams as possible in the playoffs. So, when you're looking at that, you want to have certain teams that you play on a yearly basis, but at the same time, you also want to try to do the best you can to get as many guys into the playoffs. And, people see it from different points of view. I'm glad we still have the rivalry game. I do think we should consider, when we play it, just because you may end up playing them back-to-back weeks, which would be awkward. I know that, we need to consider the tradition, but I think it's worth a conversation on when, because I think that's significant just on how the season plays out. But other than that, I think they did the best they could with it. I think the good news is they didn't build a schedule that is locked in for a long period of time. I think that they can, do this for a couple years, reevaluate, and then have the flexibility to change it up if needed.
So are you good with not playing Penn State every year going forward?
It doesn't really matter at this point. The decision's been made. I think, we like playing Penn State. They're a great team, and it's one of those games where you find out where you're at year in and year out. And do I like playing them? I mean, not really, but because they're a very good team. But at the same time, I think the rivalry's been excellent. I think it's good for college football to see Penn State and Ohio State play.
What's your personal preference about playing Michigan, particularly not playing them in the last game?
Yeah, I just think that the tradition's so strong and it's been going on for so long. I think, it's something that, has to happen for Ohio State. And, and I think, we got to play the game every year.
Speaking of the last game.
Oh yeah, where it is, I think we should. I think it's worth a long discussion about where that game should be placed. I think if it was the same way as it was this past year, we'd be playing back-to-back games, and then who knows, maybe even playing again in the playoffs. So I just think that needs to be taken into consideration. Not that we should move it, but I think it's worth talking about.
Ryan, just real quick on that idea.
Yeah.
That's a big deal that would happen in that game. What would be or are the difficulties of playing a team like that back to back? Like what you're saying that could be, if that happened, what would be the negative about that?
Yeah, well, it's the game could not, have an impact on, a whole bunch in terms of if both teams are in the Big Ten playoff or Big Ten championship game already, then, could it minimize the game? That's my concern. Even if you played it, week 11, week 10, no matter what, it's going to matter. But if you're playing them in the Big Ten championship game already, it could be something that we haven't experienced before. That's all. So I think it's worth a discussion.
Was there any discussion to your knowledge yet about any of that, or you're just
Yeah.
saying there should have?
Yeah, no, I know that they're talking about it. I just don't think that any hard decisions have been made. I don't think they're going to be made here real soon. So I just want to be part of those conversations.
Yeah, theoretically, you could play them 3 times in a row, with the 12-team deal.
Yeah.
I mean, that would diminish the original one, wouldn't it? I mean, what you're talking about.
I think as we're talking it through, you're ultimately going to want to get into the final. We're getting way ahead of ourselves right now, but you want to be in the final 4. You want to be in the top 4, so you have a bye in that first week. So it would matter, but just not the way that you and I know the game.
Yeah.
And so, but it's going to be a new experience, But let's just talk about this upcoming year. We got a long way to go before we get there.
All right, so my response to that is, how about no? Like, I don't think we need a conversation. I understand that is something that could happen. The teams could play again for a second straight week, potentially 3, right? Playoffs, and that's one of the things that was discussed as well. But guess what? That's college football. That's what college football is now. And just because it might be difficult, I understand. Ohio State didn't want to have to play Michigan again as it was. As much as some of them might have said so, I can tell you this. Conversations I had with staff on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium immediately following the Big Ten championship game was, we want Ohio State again. That is who we want to play again. We want Ohio State either right away or in the national championship game, because they had no doubt that they were going to do the same thing to Ohio State again. And certainly Ryan Day, as much as he had a bunch of talk about last year not being good enough and how many different things have changed and how they are way more extreme in their preparation. Not going to get into it, but I'm just more, we're more extreme with the way our preparation is more extreme. We're not going to play scared the way we did before he goes out and says the softest, most scared thing possible. Let's continue talking about this here in just a moment. And then we are going to get to, I had a one-on-one with Rick Neuheisel from CBS, or it says it, CBS, and SiriusXM's Full Ride. So we'll listen to that as well. You can call that phoning it in, but you know what? It's like I've said before, and I have no qualms about saying it's been a long, long day, right? That's what Big Ten Media Days is, but we grind for you. Anyway, let's get to that here in just a moment. Before we do, for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be absolutely, positively sure that every part you need fits right the first time around. So just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know what part will fit, or your money back. That's right, your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. All right, so a couple of things here that we did not get to in the first segment there when it comes to Ryan Day and his attitude towards, hey, listen, I'm just asking questions. Maybe we need to have that conversation about changing a tradition that's been in place for all but 4 years since 1935. We're talking almost 100 years of tradition. And if college football is all tradition, and that's what makes it special, guess what? You don't change tradition. I understand. There are certain things that are changing in college football. And while Ryan Day, as you heard, sat there and said, hey, it could be week 10, week 11. It's not going to change the gravity of the game. All right, yeah, that might be true. And as much as he can sit there and say, oh, play again, a couple weeks later and everything. Listen, it does change the gravity of the season in the sense of you have, if Michigan plays Rutgers to end the season, Michigan plays a non-conference game or something like that. It just takes a lot of the oomph out of it, right? That the whole point is building to that game. And if the two teams are good enough to be able to meet again the following week when the Big Ten goes divisionless, guess what? So be it. That certainly, when it was the leaders and legends, the Big Ten set it up purposely with the idea that they could meet again the following week. Never happened. Guess what? Everything's gotten much bigger. Starting in 2024, USC is certainly going to be in that contention. Other teams are getting better. Penn State could be in that contention. Michigan might have to play Ohio State, but it might, in some years it will play USC. Ohio State will not. In some other years, Ohio State will play USC, and Michigan might have a softer schedule when it comes to the conference. So I just think that is just a really soft way of thinking with the idea of you're going to get out of playing back-to-back. I can tell you that if Michigan could have played Ohio State again the next week, this past year, they would have been all for it. The fact that he thinks that's a conversation that needs to be had, that tells you kind of what you need to know. This is coming from a program, as people on Twitter were quick to remind, is, hey, this program discussed wanting to play games in a dome, to avoid host a playoff game in the first round, have it at a neutral site in a dome rather than being on campus, because the elements apparently don't agree with the sensitivities and of this Ohio State team, which is just completely asinine, right? If LSU, who's used to playing in 80-degree heat, has to come up and play in a 30-degree stadium, you're going to take them and say, you know what, it would be much better if you had some kind of climate control, right? That is softness. This also is softness. If you are considered one of the best teams in the country, you should not have any, I understand it's hard to beat the same team twice, but you should not have any qualms about when to see that team again. Actually, you would think that Ohio State, after years like 2018, 2019, would be like, you know what, we would love to play Michigan again next week, because what would be better than beating Michigan once in a given year? It would be having a bonus game in which you beat them twice. You beat them to win. I guess now it wouldn't be a division situation, but you win to get the right to go to the championship game, and then you beat them for the right for the championship. I understand there is a feeling that maybe, just maybe, it will take some luster off the game. Certainly with game planning, it could change, especially if both teams have clinched. But let it happen that way, right? There's no guarantees, is what I'm saying, that these two teams would face each other back-to-back all the time. Certainly, that could have been the case in the 10-year war or after that, and certainly it could have been the case in some of these other years if everything was divisionless, but it hasn't turned out that way. It didn't turn out that way in the Leaders and Legends era, and I don't know. It's to me, it's just it's as my friend Nezzy said on Twitter, it's you can tell that he's from New Hampshire. All right, before we move on, I do want to take a look at some quote tweets that I thought were absolutely spot on that responded to the original tweet that I put out there right after Ryan Day said this. Seth Fisher from MGO Blog, the dude has a 31-2 career record against the Big Ten, and people are saying he could get fired from his dream job if he goes 39-3 at the end of the next one. Nobody would like the game to be just a game more than this man. Accurate. Noah Needlinger says, LOL, didn't OSU say something about playing playoff games at a neutral domed site rather than their home stadium too? Patrick Barron, my nemesis, says, I've never been more sure as right now that Michigan will win 3 in a row. Soft. My guy Nezzy, who I mentioned earlier, said, sounds like something a guy from New Hampshire would say. Hoover Street Rag is somewhat in defense of it, but notes it's a terrible idea. Jordan Strack, formerly of WTOL, says if Ohio State lost to Michigan twice in a 7-day span, the university would have to shut down the football program and Ryan Day would have to move to a remote island in the Caribbean. Let's see, is there any others here? Lots of expletive. Matches Malone says, man born on third base is afraid to play Michigan back-to-back. So, yeah. Caleb Clover, kindly, this is the most idiotic statement I've ever read. And SEC does it and gets blessed. Why should Ohio State and Michigan punish themselves? Well, they're in different divisions, right? Like Georgia and Alabama are in different divisions, so it's a little different. Okay, let's move on. Let's hear from Rick Neuheisel. I'm not going to do a heck of a lot of opining on what he has to say, but actually just play it, and we'll do that here in just a moment. All right, so we on this podcast are completing. It's not quite the same because we had officially as guests. We've had Chris Childers on the podcast. We've had Allie Gearing on the podcast multiple times, usually when Michigan plays Maryland. But we haven't had Rick Neuheisel. So we're trying to complete the full ride trifecta. That's my favorite show on SiriusXM. But we haven't been able to we haven't arranged to have him. And he's still not really on the podcast. We're just playing an interview that I had one-on-one with him earlier. But I did discuss the idea of him coming on. He said absolutely. So look forward to that at some point. Maybe we'll even do something special and just have a full ride week. I think that would be fun. So anyway, let's hear what Rick Neuheisel had to say about Michigan. We started off talking about the Big Ten, and then we went into the whole thing. Yes, he did have a little bit of a mistake when he said that Iowa has made it into the college football playoff. Listen, dude's been covering mostly SEC. It happens. But anyway, take it away. All right, Rick, now that you're coming into the conference and everything, how do you look at the hierarchy of the Big Ten entering the 2023 season?
Well, the hierarchy is kind of like it's been for some time. You start with Michigan and Ohio State, right? The Bo and Woody days seem to have been extended. There are different names involved with the programs now, but those programs have found a way to withstand the test of time and are right there at the top, having both made the college football playoff a year ago. Penn State, obviously, is a huge brand in the world of college athletics and in particular college football. They're right there. James Franklin's got them right where he wants them in terms of prestige and so forth and big expectations with that program. And then all the rest of these programs, have proven that they're dangerous any year. Iowa's been to the college football playoff. USC has not. Right? That gives you an idea of the prowess of a Hawkeye program. Brett Bielema has got Illinois going. I mean, Wisconsin now with Luke Fickell, complete about face from the Barry Alvarez days, but certainly a statement made as to try to get to the pinnacle, right? So there's some great programs in this deal, some great coaches. PJ Fleck's done a wonderful job at Minnesota, and I'm going to be leaving people out, but I'm just telling you, it's a great league.
You've obviously been paying attention to Michigan. You talk a lot about them on Full Ride. But what's been the big difference in your eyes from back in the early Harbaugh years when it was easy to be critical of them to now?
One of the questions I'm really looking forward to asking Jim. What changed? And I'm guessing that it's going to have a lot like if you talk to Kirby Smart at Georgia, where he talked about connectivity, which is basically the glue that exists in a locker room with teammates. It's easy to create relationships with a position group because you're in the meetings with them and you go through all the same things together and you forge friendships. It's more difficult to do that with people in other position groups, especially on the other side of the ball. And so a head coach in trying to create a culture needs to create opportunities for those people to bond and to create glue, relationships of trust, so that the team is cohesive away from the locker room as it is while you're playing a game. And that connectivity, I have a feeling, is going to be the secret to the sauce that has taken the maize and blue back to the playoffs.
Now, you played quarterback for a guy like J.J. McCarthy. How much of a boon is it for him, and how much of an impediment can also be to have the dynamic running back duo that Michigan has?
Best thing a quarterback can have is a running back. Number one, it gives you a play off. You hand it off, and you can relax and not have to worry about making the right read, knowing down and distance and all that kind of stuff. It's just an easy down to participate in. Carry out a fake and you're good, right? A running game forces extra people in the box, which creates easier defensive looks to either play action pass or even drop back pass, because single high creates more space for 5 receivers. There's usually only 4 underneath defenders. So now you can throw with what we call horizontal reads, which are easier, one-on-one reads outside with your wide receivers. The more you are leaning to the pass or put yourself in long yardage situations, the more 2 safeties show up in the defense, the more now you have to be more accurate, you have to be much more careful with the football. That becomes more problematic. So the best thing you can have is a running game, and in particular a running game that can also feature your legs, because that's an extra hat in the box that is mandatory when the quarterback can run.
Which Michigan players are you most excited to actually get to see this year, and especially if you get to be in a game in person? Is there one that you're looking at and saying, like, I can't wait to see what that guy's able to do?
Listen, JJ and Blake are headliners, but the Donovan Edwards, that guy to me has kind of the heart of the Wolverines. I mean, for him to play as injured as he played last year and to be as explosive as he was, to me, is kind of maybe a leader behind the scenes. I'm anxious to watch Donovan play, as well as the trenches. I mean, Jimmy Harbaugh, when he was at Stanford and I was at UCLA, you knew you were going to be in a war when it came to the trenches. That will also be the case when you're playing the Wolverines.
Michigan obviously has beaten Ohio State each of the last 2 years. How hard is it to get that next game when the other team now knows, especially Ohio State had dominated the rivalry for so long. Now Ohio State really knows that they can't take it for granted. How much harder does that become for Michigan this next year?
When you look at Ohio State, Ryan Day's version of Ohio State, what is he, 34-2 in the Big Ten play? Those 2 losses are so much bigger than common sense would have them be, because they are at the hands of Michigan and Jim Harbaugh and the rival, and it's astounding that that's the situation, but it's the reality. And as you lose those 2 games and you lose them soundly, the pressure to change that narrative gets exponential. So there's big time pressure on the Scarlet and Gray to change their fortunes in that particular rivalry.
Awesome, thank you. All right, pretty good stuff, I thought, from Coach Neuheisel. He's a guy who is certainly not shown particular affection towards Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, at least early in Harbaugh's tenure. In the last couple of years, he's certainly softened his stance as far as that's concerned. But really good stuff. Definitely hope to have him back on soon. You heard it here first, or probably, because this will probably be out before I type it all up, but we'll see. Anyway, that's going to do it for Big Ten Media Days day number 1. We'll be back either late at night on Thursday. Probably more accurately, we'll be back on Friday morning, and we'll just try to double up because not only do we have the full long day of Big Ten Media Days, also got to drive home back to Fenton and pick up the puppy and all of that. So All right, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.